The flashing lights painted my living room in frantic strokes of red and blue. Outside, a woman was screaming, her voice a shrill symphony of entitlement and rage. It was Brenda. Of course it was Brenda. She was pointing a trembling, manicured finger at my front door, her face contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. A drone, her little eye in the sky, lay on my lawn like a swatted fly. A sheriff's deputy, a man I knew as Deputy Old Tom, was trying to calm her down, which was like trying to reason with a tornado, using a strongly worded letter. He looked tired. He'd seen this movie before. I stood in my doorway, holding a cup of coffee in one hand and a thick, leather-bound folder in the other. My heart was beating like a drum solo. Not from fear. Oh no. From pure, unadulterated, glorious anticipation. Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this particular pickle, with a screaming HOA president on my lawn and a lawman looking like he'd rather be wrestling a greased pig at the county fair. It all started, as these things so often do, with something small, something simple, something that was absolutely none of her business. It all started with a lock. Let's rewind. My wife Sarah and I bought this place 3 years ago. It's in one of those weird hybrid neighborhoods that can't decide if it wants to be country or suburbia. We have 5-acre lots, old oak trees, and the kind of quiet that lets you hear a deer sneeze. But we also have a homeowners association. It was sold to us as a good thing, a way to preserve property values and maintain community standards. What it really was a kingdom, and its queen was Brenda Culpepper. Brenda lived 3 lots down in a beige palace with a lawn so perfect it looked like it was rendered by a computer. She was the president of the HOA, a position she'd held for a decade. She carried a clipboard everywhere, a sort of scepter of her petty authority. Her official title was President, but everyone just called her Brenda with the binder. She walked with the stiff-backed posture of someone who had never been told no in her adult life and found the very concept offensive. Our first interaction was over grass, my grass. It was, according to a notice she left taped to my door, 1/4 of an inch too high, a violation of Covenant 7, Article 4, subsection B. I was supposed to be fined $50. I mowed the lawn and sent the board a polite email with a picture of a ruler stuck in the freshly cut turf, asking if this met with their approval. I never got a reply, but the fine disappeared. It was a test. A probe of my defenses. I had passed, but I knew I was on her radar. For 2 years, we lived in a state of Cold War peace. I kept my grass short, I put my trash cans away on time, and I didn't paint my house a color that would offend her delicate sensibilities. It was annoying, but manageable. The quiet was worth the occasional hoop jumping. Then came the lock. Sarah is a nurse who works unpredictable shifts. Sometimes she comes home late, fumbling for her keys in the dark. I work from a home office, which involves a lot of packages being delivered. A smart lock, one of those keypad and fingerprint deals, just made sense. It was about convenience, sure, but it was also about peace of mind. I spent a weekend installing it. I'm no master craftsman, but I'm competent with a screwdriver. I got it fitted perfectly, programmed our fingerprints and a guest code, and admired my handiwork. It was sleek, black, and frankly, looked a lot better than the tarnished brass handle that had been there before. It was a modern convenience on a modern house. I didn't give it a second thought. I should have. I should have known that in Brenda's kingdom, there is no such thing as an unexamined improvement. She must have seen it on one of her daily patrols, her golf cart humming along the asphalt like a bloated electric beetle. The next day, the first letter arrived. It was formal, printed on thick, cream-colored paper, with the HOA logo embossed at the top. It was a notice of violation. My new lock, it seemed, was an unapproved architectural modification. It referenced a section of the bylaws about maintaining a harmonious and aesthetically pleasing exterior appearance for all homes. The lock, with its black finish and keypad, was not on the pre-approved list of hardware finishes, which consisted of brushed nickel, antique brass, or oiled bronze. My lock was, I guess, None of the above. Therefore, I had 30 days to remove it and restore the original hardware, or face a fine of $100, escalating by $25 per day thereafter. I read it twice. Then I started laughing. It was the laugh of a man who can't believe the sheer, unmitigated gall of it all. A lock. She was coming after me for a door lock. Sarah came home, and I showed her the letter. She rolled her eyes so hard I thought she might sprain something. "You've got to be kidding me," she said, testing the new lock with her thumb. It beeped and clicked open. "This is the best thing we've done to this house. Is she for real?" Oh, she was for real. Brenda was as real as taxes, and twice as unpleasant. That night, I didn't take the lock off. Instead, I dug out the monstrous 3-ring binder of HOA covenants and bylaws they gave us at closing. I sat at my kitchen table and read the whole cursed thing, cover to cover, fueled by coffee and spite. It was a masterpiece of vague, contradictory, and utterly useless legalese. It specified the exact shade of beige your gutters could be, but had nothing, and I mean nothing, to say about door handles or locks. The section she quoted, the harmonious appearance clause, was a catch-all, a blanket statement so broad you could use it to outlaw garden gnomes or wind chimes if you were feeling particularly tyrannical, which Brenda clearly was. So I drafted my reply. I was polite, but firm. I quoted the letter back to her. I noted that while the bylaws were specific about many things, door hardware was not among them. I stated that the term harmonious was subjective, and that in my subjective opinion, the new lock was a significant aesthetic and functional improvement. I finished by respectfully declining her request to remove it and stating that I would not be paying any fines related to this matter. I sent it via certified mail, return receipt requested. That little green card, when it came back with her signature on it, was my proof. The opening volley had been fired. I had no idea that I wasn't just starting a war over a lock. I was lighting the fuse on a bomb that had been buried under this neighborhood for 50 years. And Brenda, in her infinite arrogance, was about to hand me the detonator. She had picked a fight with the one person who had the map to the minefield she was so gleefully tap-dancing through. She just didn't know it yet. The first fine notice arrived exactly 1 week after Brenda signed for my letter. $100. It was as if my certified response had never existed. It was a power move, a clear signal that facts and reason had no place in her dominion, only compliance. I sent another certified letter, attaching a copy of my first letter and the signed receipt. I reiterated my position and stated that any further fines would be considered harassment. This, I thought, was how you handled these things. You create a paper trail. You stay professional. You assume that eventually the other party will realize they have no legal leg to stand on. I was so beautifully, wonderfully naive. The fines didn't stop. They started coming daily. $100. Then $125. $150. The envelopes, with their smug, embossed logo, piled up on my counter. It was like a subscription service for nonsense. Sarah was getting worried. "Can she do this?" she asked, looking at the growing stack of demands. "I don't know," I admitted. "But we're not paying it. It's the principle of the thing." And it was. This was no longer about a lock. It was about a woman who had crowned herself queen and expected us all to be her loyal, unquestioning subjects. If you've ever battled a clipboard tyrant, you know what I'm talking about. Go ahead and tap that like button if you've been there. My next move was to talk to a neighbor. Old Man Hemlock lived on the lot behind me. His family had owned the land for generations, long before some developer got the bright idea to slap the name Whispering Pines Estates on it and invent a bunch of rules. Hemlock was in his 80s, with hands like gnarled oak roots and eyes that had seen more than the rest of us ever would. I found him out by his fence line, mending a stretch of old barbed wire. "Having some trouble with the queen bee, are you, son?" he asked before I even opened my mouth. News travels fast in a quiet neighborhood. I told him the whole story. The lock, the letters, the fines. He just chuckled, a dry rustling sound like leaves skittering across pavement. "She's a piece of work, that one," he said, pulling a wire taut. thinks that binder of hers is holy scripture. But this land is older than her rules. He squinted at my house, then pointed a leathery finger towards the road in front of my property. You see that big oak? The one with the split trunk? I did. And you see that old iron post about 100 feet to the east of it? The one covered in rust and vines? I saw that too. It was barely visible, almost swallowed by the overgrown edge of the woods. That's the real line, he said. The original survey marker for your parcel. The developer who put in this road, he cut a deal with your granddaddy. A handshake deal. Never filed the paperwork right. A little alarm bell went off in the back of my head. What do you mean, my granddaddy? I asked. I bought this from a family named Peterson. Hemlock shook his head. The Petersons only had it for a few years. It was your grandfather, Arthur Gable, who owned all this. Sold most of it off, kept this piece. He was a stubborn old goat. Hated HOAs. He made damn sure his parcel was carved out separate. You ought to look at the original county plat maps, not the ones the developer drew up. My blood ran cold. My grandfather? Arthur Gable? My mother's father, who had passed away when I was a kid. The man who had left me a dusty old footlocker in his will, a thing my mom called a box of old junk that I'd stored in my attic and forgotten about. The property had passed through a few hands before it got to me. The connection lost to time. I suddenly felt like I was standing on ground that was shifting beneath my feet. I went home and told Sarah what Hemlock had said. Her eyes went wide. The footlocker, the one from your grandpa, it's in the back of the attic, behind the Christmas decorations. That night, we didn't watch TV. We went hunting in the attic. And there it was. A heavy olive drab military footlocker. Stenciled on the side was Gable A. I pried open the rusted clasps. It smelled of old paper and cedar. And inside, beneath some folded uniforms and medals, was a slim portfolio. And within that portfolio, wrapped in oilcloth, was a document. It was a deed. The original deed for my 5 acres, dated 1957. Along with it were hand-drawn survey maps, correspondence with the county assessor, and a signed, notarized document from my grandfather explicitly stating that his parcel, designated as Lot 1, was exempt from any future homeowners association covenants that might be established on the surrounding land he was selling off. It was a land mine, buried for 60 years. A legal document that turned Brenda's sacred binder into a work of pure fiction. Her authority, her rules, her fines, they were all built on a foundation of sand, and I was holding the tide. Meanwhile, Brenda was escalating. My refusal to bend to her will was driving her insane. She graduated from letters to personal appearances. I'd be in my office and see her golf cart creep to a stop on the road in front of my house. She'd just sit there, staring. Then she got bolder. She started walking up my driveway, her pastel heels sinking into the gravel, to peer at the lock, her clipboard held in front of her like a shield. This was a clear escalation, from mailing letters to physical presence. It felt invasive. Sarah, who is far more tech-savvy than I am, took this as a personal affront. "Oh, heck no," she said, her eyes narrowing. "She wants to watch us? Fine, we'll watch her back." That weekend, we installed a full security camera system. 4 high-definition cameras, covering every angle of the house, the driveway, and the front yard. We put up a couple of small, discreet signs that said property under 24/7 video surveillance. It was perfectly legal. All on my own property. The system fed directly to a server in my office and backed up to the cloud. Sarah set up motion alerts on our phones. It didn't take long to pay off. 2 days later, my phone buzzed. It was a motion alert from the front door camera. I pulled up the live feed, and there was Brenda. She had crept right up onto my porch. My porch! She was peering at the smart lock, then she actually reached out and touched it, running her finger over the keypad as if it were a piece of alien technology. Then she took out her phone and started taking pictures of my door. While standing on my property, I saved the footage. I saved it with a file name I remembered to this day. Exhibit A. The Queen had breached the castle walls. And the court records were now officially open. The security cameras seemed to enrage Brenda further. It was like she knew I was documenting her, and instead of backing off, she doubled down. Her sense of entitlement was a physical force, a weather system of its own. If she couldn't get close enough on foot, she decided, she would get a better view from the air. This is when she declared war from the sky. This was Phase 4, the drone war. One Saturday morning, I was in my backyard enjoying a cup of coffee when I heard it. A high-pitched, insect-like buzzing. I looked up and saw it, a small white quadcopter hovering about 50 feet up, right over the center of my property. Its little camera gimbal was pointed directly at my house, at me. There was no question whose it was. I could see her, a small figure standing on the road at the edge of her own lot, holding the controller and staring intently. It was a violation so profound, so arrogant, it took my breath away. It's one thing to get a nasty letter. It's another thing to have your neighbors spy on you with a flying robot. This was no longer about a lock or a lawn. This was harassment, plain and simple. Sarah was livid. "Call the cops," she said. "That has to be illegal." "Hold on," I said, my mind racing. "Let's not be hasty. Let her think she has the upper hand." My grandfather's papers were burning a hole in my desk drawer. The map of Brenda's crumbling kingdom was in my possession, but the timing for the reveal had to be perfect. A premature move could bog us down in a civil dispute. I wanted more than a victory. I wanted a public, undeniable, and utterly humiliating surrender. I wanted poetic justice. So, I did my research. I spent an entire afternoon looking up FAA regulations, state laws, and local ordinances about drone operation. In our state, it was a gray area. Flying over private property wasn't strictly illegal unless you were creating a hazard or using it for specific criminal purposes like voyeurism, which was hard to prove. However, interfering with a drone's signal was also a big no-no, a federal offense in many cases. But I found a loophole, a beautiful, glorious loophole. You couldn't actively jam a drone's signal. But if you happened to be operating a device for another purpose, and it incidentally caused interference with a drone's command and control frequency, that was a different story. It was a subtle distinction, but in the world of legal battles, subtlety is a sharp-edged weapon. My next call was to my cousin David. David is a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but a sharp, hungry land use attorney in the city who lives for this kind of drama. I told him everything. The lock, the fines, the surveillance, the drone, and finally, the contents of my grandfather's footlocker. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, he let out a low whistle. "You're kidding me," he said. "You have the original deed and a notarized exemption? And she's trespassing on what is legally your land to harass you?" "That about sums it up," I said. I could practically hear him grinning through the phone. "Oh, this isn't just a case. This is a gift. Do not do anything. Do not send her another letter. Do not call the cops. Let her keep going. Document everything. We're not just going to get an injunction. We're going to build a case for damages. Every fraudulent fine, every minute she spends trespassing, every second that drone is in your airspace, we're going to put a price on it." His advice was like music to my ears. This was no longer a defensive action. We were shifting to offense. Sarah and I became meticulous archivists of Brenda's obsession. Every time the drone went up, we logged the time, the duration, and saved the footage from our own cameras, showing it hovering over our home. Brenda became bolder, flying it lower, making passes by the windows. She was trying to intimidate us. What she was actually doing was building our case for us, brick by brick. While David worked on the legal strategy, I worked on the tactical side. Following my research, I made a purchase. It was a piece of high-end, commercial-grade Wi-Fi equipment, a powerful directional router array. Its stated purpose was to provide a robust signal to a new workshop I was planning to build at the back of my property. It was completely legal to own and operate. It just so happened that one of the frequencies it used for its long-range communication protocol was the same 2.4 GHz frequency used by most consumer drones. It was, for all legal intents and purposes, A happy coincidence. The stage was set. The trap was baited. All I needed was for the queen to make one more move, to push just a little too far. I didn't have to wait long. Brenda, blinded by her power trip, was about to walk right into the kill zone. The best part was, she thought she was the one holding the gun. She had no idea the whole battlefield belonged to me. The day of reckoning came on a bright Saturday morning. It was the 4th of July weekend. I decided it was the perfect day to engage in a little patriotic and deeply unapproved home improvement. I was going to replace my flimsy HOA standard mailbox with a fortress. I'd bought a new one, made of heavy-gauge steel, set in a thick post that I was going to anchor in a ridiculous amount of concrete. It was black. The same beautiful, non-compliant black as my smart lock. I knew this would be like waving a red flag at a very angry, very stupid bull. I started digging the hole, right near the road, well within what Brenda considered her visual domain. It took less than 10 minutes. The telltale buzz started up. I looked up and smiled. There it was, Brenda's little spy, ascending from her yard and making a beeline for my position. She flew it right over me, maybe 20 feet up. The camera pointed down as if to document my latest transgression for the high court of her binder. I ignored it. I kept digging, whistling a cheerful tune. From the corner of my eye, I could see her, standing on the edge of her lawn, controller in hand, a smug look on her face. This was it. I casually walked back toward my garage, as if I'd forgotten a tool. Inside, I flipped a single switch on the new piece of networking hardware I had plugged in earlier. The directional antenna array, sitting on a shelf and aimed squarely at my new mailbox location, hummed to life. I walked back out to the hole. The drone was still hovering, a persistent, angry mosquito. Then, its confident hum turned into a panicked, high-pitched whine. Its propellers spun erratically. It had lost its connection to Brenda's controller. The drone's default fail-safe protocol kicked in. Land immediately. It wobbled in the air for a moment, like a drunk trying to find his keys, and then descended, landing with a gentle thud on the soft grass of my lawn, about 50 feet inside my actual property line. It was perfect, a non-violent, technically accidental, and beautifully effective neutralization. The reaction from Brenda's lawn was instantaneous. A scream. A shriek of such pure, unadulterated rage that a flock of birds took flight from a nearby tree. "You! What did you do? You destroyed my property! I'm calling the police!" she screeched, already stabbing at her phone with a furious finger. I just leaned on my shovel and smiled. "Bring it on, Brenda," I muttered to myself. This was the moment we'd been waiting for. This was the confrontation she had been begging for. The police wouldn't be coming to adjudicate a bylaw violation. They were coming to be a witness to her spectacular downfall. While she was on the phone with the 911 dispatcher, feeding them a wild tale of criminal mischief and technological terrorism, I walked calmly inside my house. I went to my office and picked up the leather-bound folder David had express-mailed me the day before. It was my own binder, and it was about to eat hers for lunch. The siren was a distant wail at first, growing steadily closer until Deputy Old Tom's cruiser rolled to a stop right between our properties. Tom climbed out of his car with the weary sigh of a man who would rather be anywhere else. It was a holiday weekend, and he was here to mediate a dispute that he clearly knew was ridiculous. Brenda descended on him like a hawk on a field mouse. She was in full meltdown. Her face was flushed. Her voice was cracking with fury, and she was waving her hands around wildly. "He did it on purpose, officer. He knocked my drone out of the sky. It's a federal crime. Destruction of property. He's been harassing me for weeks." She pointed a trembling finger at me as I emerged from my front door, holding my folder. I was the picture of calm. I had rehearsed this moment in my head 100 times. "Ma'am, calm down," Tom said in his slow, deliberate drawl. "Let's just figure out what happened here." Brenda was having none of it. She launched into a breathless tirade about my unapproved smart lock, my flagrantly illegal mailbox project, and my general campaign of architectural anarchy. She was standing on the edge of my lawn, right next to the fallen drone, using the ground itself as evidence of my crimes. "He's a menace! The bylaws are very clear," she shrieked, tapping her own binder as if it were a holy relic. Tom looked over at me. I gave him a small, patient nod. I let Brenda completely run out of steam. She finally sputtered to a halt, breathing heavily, looking at the deputy with triumphant expectation, as if she'd just successfully prosecuted a capital case. "All right, son," Tom said, turning to me. "What's your side of it?" This was my cue. I walked slowly down my driveway, my boots crunching on the gravel. I stopped a good 10 feet away from them, on my own side of the invisible line. "Well, deputy," I started, my voice even and calm, "there are a few things you need to know." I opened my folder. The first thing I handed him was a crisp, new, certified and stamped copy of a recent survey map of my property, ordered by my attorney. I had highlighted my property lines in yellow. According to this document, filed with the county recorder's office last week, the official survey marker for my property is that old iron post over there. I pointed to the rusted stake Old Man Hemlock had shown me. Tom's eyes followed my finger, then looked back at the map. I could see the gears turning in his head. He was a local boy. He knew about old markers and property lines. "Which means," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "that Mrs. Culpepper, her drone, and for that matter, the edge of this very road, are all currently on my private property." Brenda stared at me, her mouth hanging open. It was as if I'd started speaking in tongues. That's ridiculous," she stammered. "The HOA plats clearly show." "The HOA plats," I interrupted, my voice turning cold as steel, "are wrong. They are based on a developer's plan from the 70s, not on the original, legally recorded deed for this parcel." I then handed Tom the second document, a notarized copy of the original 1957 deed from my grandfather, Arthur Gable. "This is the master deed for Lot 1. As you can see, it was platted and recorded years before the Whispering Pines development was even a concept." Tom took the old document carefully. He read through it, his brow furrowed in concentration. Brenda was starting to look pale. The foundation of her world was cracking. Then I delivered the final blow. I handed him the third document, the notarized exemption. "And this, deputy, is a covenant exemption, filed by my grandfather and legally attached to the deed in perpetuity. It explicitly states that this parcel, Lot 1, is exempt from any and all rules, regulations, and covenants of any homeowners association that might be formed on the adjacent lands. In short, the HOA has no jurisdiction here. It never has." I looked directly at Brenda, who now looked like she'd been struck by lightning. "Every fine was fraudulent. Every warning letter was harassment. And every time you set foot on my lawn or flew your drone over my house to enforce rules that do not apply to me, you were trespassing." The silence that followed was stunning. The only sound was the chirping of birds and the distant hum of a lawnmower. Deputy Old Tom looked from the papers in his hand, to the rusty iron post, to the drone sitting on my grass, and finally to the sputtering, speechless woman in front of him. A slow smile spread across his face. It was the smile of a man who was about to enjoy the rest of his shift very, very much. Deputy Old Tom folded the documents carefully and handed them back to me. He then turned his full attention to Brenda. His folksy, tired demeanor was gone, replaced by the cool, crisp authority of the law. "Ma'am," he said, his voice flat, "it appears you are the one in violation of the law here. You are currently trespassing on Mr. Gable's private property." Brenda's face went through a rapid series of emotions: confusion, denial, outrage, and finally, dawning, horrified realization. "But the HOA, the rules," she stammered, her binder sagging in her hand. It suddenly looked less like a scepter and more like a stack of useless paper. "The HOA rules don't supersede county records and property law," Tom said plainly. "This man's deed and survey are legally filed. Your HOA plat map is, for all intents and purposes, irrelevant to his property. He could paint his house purple with pink polka dots if he wanted to, and there's not a thing your HOA could do about it." By now, a small audience had gathered. My next-door neighbor, Mr. Henderson, was pretending to check his mail. The Millers from across the street were suddenly very interested in weeding a flower bed near the road. They had all been on the receiving end of Brenda's tyranny at one point or another. They were watching the show, and the show was getting good. Tell me where you're listening from, because I bet you have neighbors just like this. As for the drone, Tom continued, gesturing to the inert piece of plastic on my lawn, Mr. Gable states he was setting up a new wireless network for his property. If that device incidentally interfered with your drone's signal while it was flying illegally in his private airspace, well, that sounds like an unfortunate accident for you. He let that hang in the air for a moment. However, he added, his eyes hardening, using a drone to surveil a person on their private property could be construed as harassment or stalking. And since he has you on his own security cameras, standing on his porch without permission, I'd say he has a much stronger case against you than you have against him. He looked at me. Do you wish to press charges for trespassing, Mr. Gable? The sweet, beautiful, glorious question. I saw a flash of pure terror in Brenda's eyes. The queen was toppled. The castle was breached. The peasants were watching. This was the moment of total victory. But I shook my head. No, deputy, that won't be necessary. I looked past him, directly at Brenda. Her face was ashen. I think Mrs. Culpepper understands the situation now. I just want to be left alone. All I've ever wanted was to be left alone. I wanted her humiliated, not arrested. I wanted her power broken, not her life ruined. The public dismantling of her authority, right here on the land she thought she controlled, was punishment enough. Word of Brenda's public dethroning spread through the neighborhood faster than a brush fire. The story got better with every telling. By dinner time, I was a folk hero who had discovered a long-lost magical scroll to defeat the neighborhood dragon. The HOA board convened an emergency meeting that night. Thanks to a reluctant board member, I had befriended a quiet man named George, who was tired of Brenda's reign. I got a full report the next morning. Apparently, when faced with the undeniable proof that their president had been operating outside the law and had exposed the entire board to potential lawsuits for fraud and harassment, her allies vanished. The enablers who had nodded along to her every decree suddenly developed strong moral compasses. They turned on her, stripping her of the presidency and demanding her immediate resignation from the board. She resigned via a curt email the next day. The reign of terror was over. A few days later, a for sale sign appeared on Brenda's perfectly manicured, beige-colored lawn. The castle was being abandoned. But I wasn't quite finished. My cousin David, ever the shark, drafted one final letter. It wasn't a threat. It was an invoice. It was addressed to the Whispering Pines Estates Homeowners Association. It listed, in meticulous detail, all of our costs, the fee for the rush job on the certified survey, David's legal consultation fees, and, my personal favorite, a line item for 25 hours of historical deed and covenant research and consulting services, billed at my professional rate. It was a bill for the time I had spent doing their job for them, for proving the limits of their own authority. The total was just over $5,000. It was a bold, petty, and deeply satisfying move. They paid it. They paid it without a word of protest. The check arrived a week later with a brief, humbled note from the new board president, apologizing for the unfortunate misunderstanding. Sarah and I used that money to take a vacation. A wonderful, relaxing trip to a place with no rules, no clipboards, and no prying eyes in the sky. When we got back, I finished my mailbox project. I set that black steel beast in 300 pounds of concrete. It's a monument to property rights and the quiet joy of being left the hell alone. And right next to it, I installed a 20-foot flagpole, something expressly forbidden in Brenda's old Bible of bylaws. I fly the American flag, and beneath it, a flag with a giant cartoon chicken on it, just because I can. The crown jewel of my victory sits on my porch. It's a life-sized, incredibly tacky, rust-colored metal rooster statue I found at a flea market. My grandfather would have loved it. It's the first thing you see when you drive down our street. It's hideous. It's glorious. It's a daily reminder that a person's home is their castle, and sometimes you have to fight for it. Every now and then, I'll be sitting on my porch, sipping my coffee, and I'll look at that ridiculous rooster. I'll see the new family moving into Brenda's old house. I'll hear the quiet of the country around me, a quiet I earned back, and I'll smile, because there is no justice quite as sweet as poetic justice. The kind that's served cold, with a side of irrefutable legal paperwork. And that, my friends, is why you always read the fine print. Let me know in the comments about the time you won against your own clipboard tyrant. I've got all day to read them. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to tap that like button. It really helps the channel.